Welcome in, everybody. It's Max from Destination Unknown, Paper Gold, and Common Ground Finds, of course. I am now on Destination Unknown, episode number 14. I can't believe I made it this far. I am back in California. I am with Mike from Grizzly Pulp in Kensington, California, right next to Berkeley. And I'm going to have Mike introduce himself, and then we're going to do what we do so best. We're just going to go in and start learning all about it. So, Mike, take us away. Tell us about who you are, what you do, and the craziness of your life.
The story of my life is quite inconsequential. Anyway, so hi, my name is Michael Monson, and I am the I don't know if I want to say publisher of Grizzly Pulp. I'm the brain trust behind Grizzly Pulp. I have a business partner who is the publisher. We started up in around 2019 is when the concept came into fruition, and then we published just right at the beginning of COVID, because why not? Everybody's going to be at home, and of course everybody will want to read pulp books.
Right. No, of course. I mean, but they're home.
Yeah, exactly.
So 19 was the initial inspiration and the ideas, and then it took another year or so to collate it all together.
Well, the original idea goes all the way back to about 1984 or 1985.
I just heard George Orwell whisper in my ear. Okay.
Well, you know what? Orwell could learn a thing or two from Grizzly Pulp.
Okay.
There you go.
So yeah, we're going back decades now for the original concept.
Yeah. So the original concept for me basically came from, I went to high school in Berkeley.
Okay.
So, and at that time, Berkeley was well known for an awful lot of things, some good, some bad. But the one thing that Berkeley had that just about nobody else on the face of the earth had was we had more bookstores, per square block, per square mile, per square inch, centimeter, millimeter, microdose than any other place in the United States. And so you had a just cornucopia of different bookstores that were out there. And this is, obviously you had a little bit of the chains coming into California. You had Crown Books, Haft, which I will send you I've got a training video for Crown Books, which is just absolutely, since you worked in the trade, you have to watch this thing, because it's like everybody's a stuffed shirt. Everybody is just like, staring at the camera, and it's just like they just need one of those newspapers for where they're being held hostage.
Are they wearing button down? Are they wearing button downs?
Oh, of course. Of course. And all the women have to have, fluffy up here, bad hair, bad teeth, bad eyes. But they don't know, they don't know shit 6 ways to Sunday. So, but it starts off there. And so I started going into the smaller bookstores, mostly Shakespeare and Company, because for whatever reason, of all the crazy things, Shakespeare and Company had an awful lot of pulp books. And I don't know why, because Shakespeare and Company at that time, and I'm not sure if it's still around. I know it's left Berkeley, but it was kind of known as sort of a little bit of the upper, echelon. Yeah. Just because you have the name Shakespeare does not mean anything.
Right. It wasn't all, English literature.
Oh, good Lord, no. It was just used textbooks.
Right.
But the thing is that for whatever reason, they had an awful lot of pulp books, and they had an awful lot of like men's magazines in there too. And of course, you could just walk up and down on Telegraph Avenue, and it was whatever you wanted. Now, when I say whatever you wanted, I also meant that it was really easy to shoplift.
Right.
So that was my entrance.
We're gonna get there, but we're talking the 80s, right? We're now in the 1980s. Okay.
1980. So it all basically just starts off there, going into Shakespeare and Company.
Yeah.
And finding these books. So I mean, finding a book like this, and of course everything is reversed on the image right now, so I apologize.
Oh, we can read it. We can read it.
We'll have to redo it in post there. But you would find books like that, and they were titillating but at the same time too, you just knew that they just were absolutely just like over the top. And so what I started doing was I started whatever I had like money and things like that. I would go there and buy those pulp books, and they were pretty cheap back then. It was like $2. But then I began to notice that the stuff that was like out to me, outrageously priced for like $3 or $4, something like that, I was like, well, these are unobtainable. So it got to the point where I was like, well, I'm paying for one and getting two for free. So it eventually got to the point where I was going there, and they actually confronted me and just said, would you like a job here?
Mm.
And so I had briefly had a job working at Shakespeare and Company.
Beautiful words to be
Yeah,
echoed. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Were
Thievery.
you buying then though as a young collector? Did you understand the beautiful vintage history that these pulps were? That I mean, where was the interest for you? I mean,
So the interest came from me from basically, I would say, from a couple different sources, but one of the biggest sources that it would have come from is the cover artist for Nympho Lodge,
mhm,
Jim Silk. Jim Silk is my uncle. Jim worked at, let's see, he at one time was the art director
mhm,
at Capitol Records. So if you see like the Hondell's records, or if you see the Beach Boys records, he was the
mhm.
art director for that. So, but he worked in film, he worked in television, and so since I'm a member of the family, that got me interested. The other key element that really kind of turned my head in that direction also was, he'll deny it, but his protege was Dave Stevens, who created The Rocketeer. So Jim and Dave
Wow.
were
Yeah,
just like thick as thieves. And
yeah.
so at that point, it kind of led me in a direction of pulp books,
So
mainly due to the fact that they had an awful lot of them
yeah,
around
so
town.
so Uncle Jim was a close uncle,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so you were in the midst of his artwork, his profession, his collection.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
would see, I'm sure you would see photos and negatives and all of the stuff he was working on, whether it was the music industry or the book industry. You would see all this great stuff lying around the place.
Yeah, or you would hear stories because he worked for Canon Films. So he worked for those two. If you know anything about Canon Films, if you don't, do yourself a favor and Google it, because those guys were lunatics. That's another story for another time.
Right? Don't you wish you can go back in time right now? And
Actually, I got to meet um the Golan. Yeah, not Golan because he was like the silent, but he was like, I remember he was just briefly, he's like, do you like breakdancing? And I was like, I don't know. I'm pretty indifferent. He goes, well, we have a breakdancing movie going out. You should tell all your friends to go see it. And that was about, it was like really very, very
right.
brief. He was over at Jim's house for some oddball reason. Don't know why.
That is wildly interesting, though, that to have all of that stuff in the as a
Oh, yeah.
young man in your periphery, and
Yeah.
so you were then a young collector. Then I had to take it you were a young collector because of Uncle Jim.
Yeah. Well, because of Jim, but beyond that too, also because not only did I like the cover artwork and I like the content, I also like the fact that, and that's is the thing about pulp books, there's a little bit of something for everybody.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what attracted me to pulp books, from the beginning too. And as as the genre started, so we'll just say kind of the golden era, we'll do it like in comic books,
Right.
would have been like, we'll say about World War II. We'll because of the little books that they would send to the soldiers that would have two, like a different
I
kind
think
of
they called them kit books back in the day.
kit books. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So you had that. So it was kind of the precursor.
Yeah.
Then you have these guys that come back, from the war, and you've had your whole life has just changed. You've experienced things. So naturally you're going to kind of gravitate towards a media that basically kind of gives you the same feeling that war was like,
Right.
and you can't find that at home. And so then you start seeing pulp come out. And I would say probably the first series that really caught my attention was Shel Scott. That was probably the first one that was there that really grabbed my attention. And then it was kind of a lateral move over to Mickey Spillane, because
Right.
those books were everywhere. And
But also some of the great covers were those Mickey Spillane covers.
oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The Eye of the Jury should just be like, that should just take down somebody on, like, Mount Rushmore. Just put that up. Don't put Mick up, because he would have been like, why are you doing this? And you know, but so yeah, and so it just sort of leads in that general direction. And after I got out of high school, I go over to Cal, and because just right there, something to do. And then not too long after that, I just started working in the book trade, and it just kind of just goes from there. As you know, this is just one of those businesses that when anybody asks you what is like the ground zero moment, when does Oppenheimer blow up the bomb, you're just like, well, you had to have the dynamite explosion
Right.
ahead of time to test out if it was going to work. So I think probably the seminal moment probably was going to Shakespeare and Company, seeing the books, working there very briefly. Then from there, becoming very interested in the genre, and then starting to work in the trade.
Right.
So,
So
yeah, go ahead.
collector,
Yeah.
were you reselling at an early age?
Here's the thing. I didn't have a concept of like selling as a good idea, because I also collected records.
Hmm.
And it was one of those things where you knew that if you were going to be reaching out to other collectors that were out there, this is going to sound horrible, but those guys are craftier than Shylock and the Merchant of Venice. And of course, I'm young. I'm like, in my late teens and early 20s, and I'm dealing with book guys that are much older.
Right.
And, as we know, that's an unsavory lot of people,
Well, they know,
especially
yeah,
in
they know
Berkeley.
what's highly collectible, but you know what you want, and those could be two different things.
Well, they also like to tell you what you should be reading,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you know, in this industry too, whether you like it or not. And you're just like, well, I just don't, no, no, no. The kid, you just don't know anything about
Right.
the
Let's
biz.
listen to
Yeah.
what we're saying.
Yeah. So the collecting basically, if I had to say that there was like one moment that really like kind of put it in my mind, like, yeah, they're highly collectible, would be, if we were the book, I'm not sure if it's still in existence. I think something happened, it's either through politics or through COVID or whatever means.
Right.
And so you would go to Book Expo America, and down the midway would just be all the big publishers, and just all the bullshit book signings, and just like my favorite thing about being there was one thing. There was years where it just seemed like I'd either be taking an escalator or I'd be like on an elevator, and I'd look over and like there's Dr. Ruth. So when
Right.
she passed away, I was telling people it was the craziest thing. She'd be like, I'd see her and she's a very polite lady and wave. So there, you know, this is one of probably the reasons why they got away from doing this. They had basically what I refer to as the blow off tent at the midway. That's
Hmm.
where they would put over all the African American booksellers. That's where they would put over all of the foreign booksellers.
Hmm.
That's where they would put over all the smaller booksellers. That's where they'd be putting over wholesalers like American Book Company, who would actually have all these pulp books,
Right.
all this stuff left over, because they just acquire the assets of somebody.
Yeah.
So while everybody else was interested in doing book signings and things like that, I'd be snooping around, and trying to find something. And of course, they're selling it by the pound. They're not selling it by the price. And that's kind of where it all kind of clicked together. That is probably that was the moment of like, these things are collectible.
Hmm.
And then, as time goes on, you start, seeing there's like magazines about it. And of
Right.
course, another huge influence would have been Miriam Lena from Kix Books and from Norton Records, because she, along with Billy, they had the fanzine about pulp books.
Right.
And, hey, readers, do you want to go see something? Hang on just a second. You'll edit this. Here you go. There's a nice vintage Bad Seed t-shirt
There you go.
from her with a little switchblade, if anybody can be able to see it inside. But so I started running into Bad Seed, and then the name escapes me. Smut Peddler was the other one. So, and of course, I see these magazines, and if anybody read, especially back then in the 80s, if you read something like Bad Seed, you would have thought that they had made an awful lot of this stuff up. You would have thought that this is just like some fantastical other world that's out there.
Yeah, it was an other world though, because in order for you to even know about fanzines, you had to be in the original rabbit holes to know how to get to a fanzine, to send a check to a PO box in parts unknown, so you could, you would get this newsletter or this magazine quarterly.
Oh, I mean, absolutely.
But that was the early rabbit holes for us, was the fanzines.
I was really lucky because, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, you had everything. So you had, Search and Destroy magazine. Okay. You had just all sorts of small zines and things like that. You had the global empire that was Maxim Rock and Roll that, Tim Yohannan put his thumb on the scale of good taste and bad taste. And then beyond that too, also, I mean, especially growing up in the Bay Area, I mean, I started going to punk rock shows in 79. So all the melds together. It's just one horrible, which is rotten meat. You just tried to.
We're getting a little choppiness right now on a connection. So we're gonna just hold on a second here.
No problem.
Yeah. I wanted to filter back through. Okay, we're back. We'll edit that out. Don't worry, we'll edit that out.
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, fanzines where you could go to, and that's the other thing too, is that, there was so many independent record stores around the Bay Area. And also in addition to that too, also Berkeley also, we had Subterranean Records.
Right.
So you had one of the biggest distributors in the world that's out there. And of course, I became friends with Will Shatter from Flipper. So you meet all these people. So there's all these little basic elements that just come into, what later would become, my career path that was out there. Just all little bits, and pieces.
And so did the career path start in 2019 then, or?
No, it started around 1988. So it started with, it started with I was working for somebody that did a vanity press. And that kind of like, turned me on to just like the whole concept of you can publish anything by anybody about anything as long as they give you enough money. Mm-hmm. Now, that gets into another aspect of how Grizzly Pulp came into existence, because I'm upstairs here in my office. And then downstairs from me is Grizzly Peak Press. Okay. And that was run by Don Ellis. And Don Ellis is the founder of Black Lizard.
Okay.
Contrary to what someone else will tell you. It'll
be in the notes somewhere.
If you Google Black Lizard, you will read an awful lot of bullshit by somebody who, anyway. So when he's gone, there'll be a lot of dancing upon graves. So, but Don Ellis started up Grizzly. He sort of through Creative Arts, which was his imprint. Mm-hmm. That's where he had, the sub imprint that was out there, which was Black Lizard. Don would later sell Black Lizard to Random House for $1 million. So,
and just talk about a little bit of what Black Lizard was publishing back in the day, in the late 80s, early 90s, going forward?
Well, yeah. So Black Lizard was, hey, anybody here in this room know about Jim Thompson? Well, you didn't before Don Ellis,
Right.
because
Okay.
Don was over in Paris and started seeing all of his books were still in print there, but
Mhm.
nothing was in print here in the States because nobody really cared.
Right.
Nobody really cared about, hard-boiled fiction. Nobody really cared about it to the extent that, we now have rediscovered it.
Mhm.
And so he went there and basically got the rights to just about every Jim Thompson he can get his grubby little fingers on for like $500.
Right. But even rewinding, those were great covers too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And the European variants are really, wonderful too, because there they don't really have the same constraints of like, public consumption. So you could show a little bit more, flesh. You
Yeah.
could show a little bit more kind of a visceral cover and things like that. So that's where, when I was brought in for Grizzly Peak Press,
Mhm.
again, downstairs, part of the deal was me coming into this was, I have an idea for like an imprint. So, and just, what do you want to name it? I'm like, well, Lou Longfeld, who ran a Books Inc., you know, uh, like once told me something like really brilliant, which stuck with me. Michael, just have one really good idea, one really bad idea, and one in the middle. Grizzly Pulp is the one in the middle because Grizzly Peak Press, obviously, you take the Grizzly, and Grizzly Peak is actually the hills that are behind us.
Mhm.
And then Pulp. And so Grizzly and Pulp, obviously, it like kind of rolls off the tongue. Um, and so that's kind of where another little part of how this came into existence. Now, uh,
With a whole bunch of other variants, I'm sure.
there's
Yeah.
there's more variants than comic books in the Marvel
Yeah,
universe.
I gotcha.
We have more multiverses than Rick and Morty.
Right. So then let's fast forward a little bit because I definitely want to get back to 2019 because
Oh, sure. Yeah.
that's a vital moment and a vital year that launches
Yeah.
everything going forward. So 2019, we are pre-COVID in the world. You're revisiting an idea from the 80s.
Mhm.
Now take us to those days. Take us to
I
those.
will take you to those days, and I actually have the books. So the series that I decided would be the right series in order to launch Grizzly Pulp was the Toki Wedge series.
Okay.
And ostensibly it was written by somebody who knew the genre very well. And if you read these books, when he started writing, the first one, Nympho Lodge, in late 50s, so probably about 58, around there, he breaks the fourth wall because Toki Wedge is literally a parody of the genre. And
Okay.
that's what makes it attractive, is because he takes everything, kind of flips it on his head. So it's characters a little bit of Shel Scott, it's a little bit of Mickey Spillane, but Toki Wedge is also 5'4". So instead of driving around in a Jaguar, he drives around in an MG Sprite.
Right.
So there's an
Yeah.
awful lot of visual gags, well, written gags that are visual.
Right.
So, and I discovered these books of his, and I really just absolutely just love covers. So you would see these covers,
Beautiful.
and of
Yeah.
course that right there, the model, that's Bonnie Logan, who
Okay.
is one of my favorite pinup models from the golden era. And so from there, I was like, okay, let's go ahead and we'll go with our entertainment lawyer. and have him basically do the vetting and make sure that all of this has fallen into public domain. So that was the other thing too. As everybody knows, in publishing around 2018, kind of the gates began to open up on
Mhm.
PB. So an awful lot of stuff that was out there written in the 50s and early 60s suddenly started kind of becoming more available that's out there. So I also found out that the publishing house that originally did this, which was Camera Arts out of Chicago, run by two brothers, the Soren or Sorrentino,
Okay.
depending on which deposition in court that they were using.
How many volumes were in the library?
That is a very good
About.
question, which
Okay.
deserves a very good answer. So, the author was Max Vanderveer. So
Okay.
Vanderveer wrote an awful lot of books for Novell Books, which was part of Allied Distribution, which the company was Camera Arts. So he
Okay.
wrote around 15 books. Some of them are canonical with Toki Wedge. Some of them aren't, but they still are part of the Toki Wedge universe, is because that's how he would write. So even though it wouldn't name Toki Wedge by name, you would still end up with an awful lot of the same plot points and characters.
Okay.
And the good thing about his books, and which is the great thing about pulp books, is I always just say, before, probably the turning point for pulp, probably what it would be around 1968, when it just goes from being titillating into just full on, just like pickles and beaver. I mean, so the great thing about Toki Wedge, especially if somebody was reading this and wanted to get off, it's a one-way ticket to the Blue Ball Express, because the really the only thing that is going to be happening in this book is that a bra will drop on the floor, sheets on a bed will be moved, a little bit of action is suggested, and then cut away. He's in a bar and he's talking to a guy that he was in the war with, commiserating about we've lost all of these guys. It's like, wait, what happened to the pussy? And so again, when Vanderveer was writing this, he really was. It's very tongue in cheek, and that, like I said, was the biggest attraction, because it took me a couple times to read this and go, okay, yeah, I see where Vanderveer was going with this. And then beyond that too, he also was a editor for Alfred Hitchcock magazine at one time back in the 1950s, early 60s. He also for Ellery Queen, I believe. But at the same time too, he got in with the Soren brothers, and they had men's magazines. They had a few men magazines out there that and I'll send you the images of the men's magazines that were there.
Of the adult variety.
Well, of the adult variety, yeah, they weren't, the kind of the pulp side, which would be like,
Right.
like Frank Zappa, weasels rip my flesh
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it would be men's magazines. And so through Camera Arts and Allied Distribution, of course, they got smart. So the Sorrentino brothers started off in the 1940s doing figure magazines, which at that time you could go to a photographer, and they were based in Chicago. So they had readily available photographs that were out there of models.
Right.
And so in various, either dress or undress. And so they would start off with an artist and figure magazine. Then from there, it began to kind of blossom a little bit. So then they got into doing men's magazines. Well, I mean, you can have naked women, but you're going to need some filler. So
Right.
what do you do for filler? Well, you put in short form fiction.
Right.
Now, once you have the short form fiction and people like it, where do you go from there? Pulp books. From pulp books, you then have an entire minor league feeder system,
Yeah.
which is you can promote the book that was coming out by having an excerpt in your magazine.
Right.
All magazines do that.
Yeah.
So
That's a great point. It's a minor league system.
yeah,
Unbelievable.
it was a minor, it was the ML, it was the
Yeah.
basically down in the minors. So Vanderveer would be writing under, his pen name that he had, which I'll show you his pen name right here, everybody. Jack Lynn.
Okay.
So what makes Jack Lynn so interesting is that Jack Lynn is actually um, his first wife, Jacqueline.
Lynn.
He needed a pen name,
Jacqueline.
Jack Lynn. So, so there was little bits and pieces that of Allied distribution that really kind of worked into them becoming a
Mhm.
bit of an empire, where it becomes really interesting with the pulp and with the magazines is that for some reason, I don't know how the Sorrentino brothers did this. They ended up with Herschel Gordon Lewis and Dave Friedman. So no
Has
bill.
this story ever been told in documentary film fashion?
Good Lord, no. You know what? I have to be honest with you, Max. I have tried my best to, and there is another part which we'll get into just a second, which just blows my mind. And so, but they end up like with Herschel Gordon Lewis, and they end up with Dave Friedman, and they did the novelization of Blood Feast and 2000 Maniacs. Let that just sink in. The novelization of Blood Feast and 2000 Maniacs. And then they end up with Friedman, who had his whole empire of exploitation films that he did. So you would start seeing some of his like exploitation films end up in novelizations or end up as magazines. And so there was a whole feeder system that went into it. Now, unbeknownst to me, until about maybe 3 years ago, somehow Allied Distribution also got into being one of the largest distributors of gay men's magazines in the United States. Now, not obviously not hardcore, but
Right.
the physical,
Yeah.
the physique magazines.
Mhm.
And there's a whole other story that this is not the time or place to do it, but so I've reached out to various people that I know that know something about the gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, intergender world that's out there. People who've written books,
Mhm.
people that were involved at one time or another with either writing, some in Chicago, and everything is just ended up just kind of dead. So somehow the Sorrentinos, they ended up doing it for a while. The guy that was the publisher for this, um, we won't get too much into his whole entire life. I'll just kind of give. He basically bought some magazine in Chicago. Sorrentino's publish it while he is in the nut house for tax evasion, and also he got popped for basically for obscenity.
Okay.
So he was a very smart man. He had a degree in psychology, and he manipulated the entire room so that way he could just lay low and run his empire from there. So, I mean, there's all these different bits and pieces. There is a documentary. I've reached out a couple times to the folks over at Rialto Report because I think this is something that would really serve Rialto Report, very well, is because Rialto, even though they talk about the world of pornography and kind of the New York vibe to it, the kind of the 52nd Street sort of sleazorama. Sorrentino brothers,
Yeah.
they go in and out of everything, and they just one day they just got popped for plagiarism, got dragged before the U.S. Supreme Court.
For plagiar, out of everything that they could probably be popped for was plagiarism.
These guys were now. There's like I said, there's a whole other story, but the author of Shell Scott, you know, uh, his lawyer accused the Sorrentino brothers, and it was a story. If anybody knows anything about pulp, it was a story that came via Big Bob Trowlins. If you know anything about that guy, he is a legendary like bullshit artist. So, and of course, Novell, Merit, Allied Distribution, Camera Arts publish an awful lot of his stuff. So he's pissed off he doesn't get enough money. So he just told people like, oh yeah, I was down in Miami one day and I ran into the head of the mafia down there and I said, how come those guys aren't paying me any money? And they ended up telling me, well, you can't do anything. They're part of the family. The
Mhm.
Sorrentinos had absolutely no involvement, as far as I could be able to find, with organized crime, other than one of the brothers got popped in the late 50s for being at a card game that was run by a local loan shark and mobster.
Yeah.
Anybody in publishing at that time
Right.
was gonna be going in and out of the circles because those are the guys with the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, so Grizzly Pulp basically does have a story to tell, not only with the Toki Wedge books, but beyond that too, also the entire world of just Allied distribution. And then just one day, how it just all disappears, except they all go down to Miami and they all start getting into real estate, and they get into this real estate hustle like, hey, you're like a kind of a proto Tom Vu. Do you want to make money? Are you tired of being a loser? Come to our seminar and learn how to make, a fast buck. I have tried to find, members of the Sorrentino family. Not that much luck. I have tried to get in contact with the daughter of the author of the Toki Wedge series, and she actually posted something up on a website that did a review of one of my books,
Mhm.
and never reached back out, out to me.
Mm.
So there's a story that's out there, and you are very correct. So if there's anybody watching YouTube right now,
Please, please. Yeah.
yeah, if there's I mean, I work with, somebody where we can have the financing in order to do something, but you just need somebody that's out there to just, take a table and listen.
It's too important of a story to be left untold, I think, and so rich in carnal behavior and publishing and
Remove the carnal, put in carny, because this is just pure, this is pure carny
yeah.
bullshit that these
Okay.
guys are doing. I mean, and again, they just kind of disappear, you know. And even the author of the books that got caught for ripping off Shel Scott, I, went through newspapers.com and found his wife. She's, as far as I know, she's still alive, and I reached out to her, and never got anything back. She lives out in Minnesota,
Hmm.
and he apparently, the author who did the kind of knockoff Shel Scott, which I'll give you a little bit more, info. Again, another show, another time to get into all of that. Never got anything back from her, so I don't know if it wasn't returned to me. So obviously she's still alive, but
Right.
I mean, her her husband was accused of being, by the opposition lawyer, was accused of being a career criminal, and that they found this guy in prison or
Right.
working on a chain gang. And again, no, that's not true. So there's just an awful lot of like moving part. As with anything in pulp, there's going to be always sorts of very interesting aspects. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
need Quentin Tarantino ruining the genre for you to know that.
Okay, so I got to get back to 2019.
Okay.
We keep going down the rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
keep going down the rabbit hole. Yeah. So
It'll
at
be a
that point,
12-hour conversation if we keep doing it that way.
we'll keep it short here. So at that point, yeah, then I went back and, I said, I have an idea. Let's go ahead and have, our entertainment lawyer. So we
Uh-huh.
checked everything. We did all the vetting. It's all in public domain. So at that point, then it was uh, doing the transcriptions of 6 of the books initially in the
Hmm.
can, because we thought, okay, half a dozen is always good. So, I have an outstanding woman who works with me, who does an awful lot of my editing and
Hmm.
transcription and helps me out. Bronwyn Harris, which I'll give you her name.
Yep.
If anybody needs anything, she's the cat's pajamas.
Yeah.
And I have a fantastic typesetter and also designer who's local. So everything is all, even though it's outside, it's all in-house.
This is all wildly interesting though, but I want people to understand a few things that you're throwing out here. Explain to people when something falls out of public domain, what that means for someone like you, because you have to be in the know, you have to know they're out of public domain, and then you have to go after them. So explain that process.
So years ago, I was very fortunate to meet Forrest J. Ackerman. So everybody knows Forrest J. Ackerman through Famous Monsters of Filmland. But they probably don't know that Forrest J. Ackerman also was he was a publisher. He did books. He was an editor. He was a literary, agent and things like that. Forrest J. Ackerman gave me, a piece of advice a long time ago. Michael, the best authors are the ones who are dead because you really don't have to pay them any money.
Okay.
That is public domain, basically, in a nutshell. Disney made a fortune off of dead people. You don't have to pay anything.
Right.
That's basically, if you want to get to like what is the kind of the germ inside of public domain. Now, of course, you have to do vetting because occasionally something that would look like it is public domain isn't. You run into an awful lot of that with pulp books because of the covers and because like Robert Bonifil's or someone like that. So yes, the guts could be public domain as published. Maybe not, because the other thing you run in with PD is that you had an awful lot of authors that used, pen names. And so you would go take a look at a book and you go, oh, well, turns out that's an author of note. That's not public domain. That actually, is part of that particular author's estate.
But at that point, you have to go through a lawyer, I'm guessing, to.
It's always good.
Right.
It's always good to first, if anybody's interested in public domain, really the first place to check is the Library of Congress.
Okay.
Now, there are books that are out there that were published that would have the listing of when a book was published, when it was entered in the Library of Congress, and all the information. That's how an awful lot of people find out that a book that was written under a pen name was actually written by somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah. So you go through. Now, of course, you have to go to the Library of Congress, and so it's online, and it is page after page. And of course, when they set this up back in the early 2000s, they really haven't updated it that much. So it is a lot of vetting. That's the reason why you hire a lawyer, because they can also do kind of a LexisNexis search that kind of narrows it down. Now, there are other publishing houses that are out there that to see the book was published in 1955, and they'll just go ahead and just roll the dice and just publish it.
Sure. Okay.
But I think with Grizzly Pulp, I always had in mind that if this takes off, that kind of a larger picture is that the content that we have, this would be perfect to do some sort of streaming, because it's so over the top and so just kind of crazy. And, this is before streaming, in 19 was just like had gone through the roof, and this is the new thing. Now, of course, there's the condensing and the penny pinching and the the Warner Brothers-ification of the industry right now. But again, that's another thing. And I've been trying to find somebody to help us do an initial screenplay, because there's content that's out there.
Yeah.
And of course, because you have all of these books that are there, this stuff is readily available.
So how many volumes are in your library now with Grizzly?
So right now we publish 2, 6 are in the can, and there's other ones that are available. I actually have the little box that's right behind me. If you look over here behind me, right there, you'll see those totes. About 90% of those pulp books that are inside of there, those are all books that have fallen in the public domain.
Wow.
So
that really is a wow moment. That's a wow moment. Yeah.
And so when people, and this is kind of the big takeaway I always tell people, is that when people talk about there's no new content, I'm getting tired of the Marvel universe. They've done everything. I'm tired of DC. I'm tired of Star Wars. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. I sure wish there was something that was out there.
Right.
Pulp books. I've just given somebody in Hollywood the keys of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Because literally these books have fallen into public domain. Sometimes, due to publishing houses just going out of business. Sometimes due to publishing houses also, and this wasn't the case of the Sorrentino brothers being owned and operated by organized crime. They weren't really in the business of registering copyright. They're in the business of getting a book in your hand and having you jack off.
Right.
Yeah, and buying another one.
Well, so I'm also, I'm a reseller. I'm in the reselling community, do a lot of things there. And I know if I don't ask you this, the resellers are going to get mad at me.
Yeah.
When a publishing house like that closes down, where do all the copies go? Are they just sent to the trash heap?
Nope. So often what happens is that, we'll just use, like the kind of oh God, I'm kind of drawing a blank right now on it, but there was one whole porno publishing house, boy, say that 5 times, 10 times fast, whole porno publishing house that existed, kind of going into the latter part of the 90s before the internet really just basically issued the death knell. And, and also take consideration too, as I always tell people, the reason why pulp books really worked for a certain period, it was because it was something portable that you could hide.
Right.
And you could jack off to, or at least try as hard as you possibly could. You could get it at a liquor store. You can get it at a bus station. It was readily available.
Well, they also fit very easily into a back pocket.
Back pocket. You could sneak it in from your wife, girlfriend, kids, hide it in a sock drawer. So when they would just go out of business, often what would happen is that they would just have a liquidation. So obviously what happens with a liquidation is, in the case, and like I said, I'm really drawing a blank right now. I'm the publisher right now. They had an involvement with organized crime and they just had to liquidate. That stuff ends up with wholesalers like American Book Company.
Right.
Where ABC would just go out and just be like, all right, we'll take all your pallets, and you will find an awful lot of those books on Etsy and eBay. And like yourself with other sellers, you'll know that basically these were the ones that were returns, because as you know, they have a cut corner.
Yeah. Or sometimes they hole punch them. Sometimes
you get a hole punch. Sometimes you would get somebody had a drill going all the way through. So I mean, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not collectible.
Right. Oh no, I know the market. It's still highly collectible.
Exactly.
And it's really not, oftentimes it's not just the artist. It's not just the writers. Like you said, it's the cover artist who did the artwork.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's either, if not the cover artist, then it's the photography that's on the cover.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just get, stuff that is just so just kind of wild and over the top, where, okay, what's going on with this thing?
Yeah.
And so again, I mean, as far as when a publishing house goes out of business, I could just attest to what happened to Allied Distribution.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We had a warehouse. We sold everything in the warehouse. I know that we owe all this money to this lawyer and this law firm and this lawsuit. Good luck. We're moving to Miami.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff just sort of dissipates. And that, again, if you're going to be doing a documentary, is, the real story of the documentary and the real story about, what you're interested in, the collectability, really has to do with the distribution of it. And that's a story that's really never been told.
Yeah, I think you and I are going to need a part 2, 3, 4, and 5 here, because I love this story. It's not just one story; it's many stories that collide.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it has to be told.
Yeah.
You may be one of the legacy sayers here because of what your knowledge is, but this has to be told. And historians in our book selling community need to know about it. Yeah.
If you know anything about historians in the book selling community, they're more provincial than the most provincial Frenchman in the history of
Not all of
mankind.
them. Not all of them. We got to find the ones who
Yeah.
unlock the door.
Miller is a perfect example of
Yeah.
somebody that's out there that's gotten into the trade,
Right.
and his mind is completely open versus an awful lot of the people I was just talking about. Their brains are like spaghetti strainers. They're just looking for that one strand that falls through that they could be able to take advantage of.
Okay. So okay. We got to wind this
Yeah,
down here
wind it
because
up.
I see where this is going, and we're not going to stop. We're going
Yeah,
to be having dinner on camera tonight. Are you still a collector?
absolutely. But and that's the other thing too. Hey, folks, if you go
Oh,
to
yep. Hold on, you're
Instagram,
chopping up. Hold on. We're gonna repeat that. Hold on. Hold on. We're gonna
okay.
repeat that again. All right. All right. Are you still collector?
I'm still a collector, but right now, if anybody goes to the Instagram feed for Grizzly Pulp,
Mhm.
you're going to see that I've been having summer sales.
Okay.
So I'm having summer sales here in Kensington in order to, bring people in to sell some, kind of older back stock and things like that, but also to encourage people to pay attention to the brand. So I will be listing books, on Instagram for people to purchase. This is the one thing that I've always firmly believed in from moment one, which is I hate collector scum. I loathe and hate and despise these people because they have now come into the pulp world.
Mhm.
They, especially with pulp that is gay, it is obscene
Right.
the amount of money that these people are ripping you off
Yeah.
for this content. When basically an awful lot of the gay content that's out there was considered not only worthless, but basically it would be sort of an adjunct to the straight world or the fetish world.
Mhm.
Um, I try to offer things at a completely reasonable price
Okay.
because I'm more interested, as we've had this conversation, as you can be able to tell, to get people interested in the genre, to get them into collecting.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah, and as someone like yourself, as you found out by like the first time, hey, I got a box of books. What the hell is this? What is the value? I just use this as an example. So, I'm also selling records at the summer sale. So I have a copy of the Cramps second 45 or first 45, which is Human Fly, which has a glow in the dark cover. It's a variant. I got it from them because I read about it in New York Rocker or something like that. Sent away my money. It didn't show up for like months.
Right.
And I actually wrote an angry letter to the Cramps, like, you goddamn ripoff artist. I can't stand you. And of
P.O.
course,
Box 10107. Yeah.
yeah, it was like, you bastards took my money. And if you wouldn't you come in San Francisco, I'm gonna pelt you with ice cubes and pennies until you're crying mercy. I got it back, finally got it from them. So I have the original pressing for it of Human Fly. And I was like, just going through the boxes just back there. And I was like, I just wonder what the value is. So somebody out there on Discogs has put the value of that 45 at $1,500. I bought that $2.50 shipped. This is how unreasonable and how despicable and disgusting collectors can be
Right.
because you're driving an artificial market.
Yeah, but rarity is key in this market. And if that's the only copy for sale out there, that person is going to ask for as much as they want.
Yeah.
And what happens is if they get it, then the next copy is going to be
They
2,500.
set the bar. Whereas you have people like me that go back to people and I will tangle with them and just go, you're fucking the business up for everybody.
Well, I'll buy from you for $10 if you want. I mean, I'll take it
Yeah,
off your hands.
exactly. Now, of course, sometimes as anything that, if you're a collector like yourself, there's going to be some horse trading and you're going to, I'll go back and say, I got 3 copies of this. I got one that's kind of mid-grade. I'll sell you the mid-grade, you sell it. And if you make, a couple bucks off of it, what we'll do is we'll go for the one that has like, basically a much better binding, much better cover. And then what I'll do is I will sell that to you at a decent price. But let's go in. This is the thing I've gone with people. Let's go into a partnership, because if you can be able to basically find a whale that's out there and you got them hooked, let's get them addicted like heroin.
I got ideas for you already. You and I are gonna be talking this weekend. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
All right, one more. I got to ask you one more question. It's the most important question of this show.
Okay.
You are episode 14. I never know where I'm going. Talking about California. The intro to this episode is Destination Unknown, the song by the Missing Persons, of course. That's the intro that I use. I saw them when I was 14 years old, and I'll never forget that band and that concert. Episode 15 will be somebody who you're sending me to. I never know who it is. So where are you sending me?
I'm going to send you over to, and he doesn't know about this yet because I love surprising him. Okay. It's going to be somebody who I've worked with at Books Inc. for a long time, and somebody who I have an awful lot of respect for. Not only because he has to go deal with the bullshit of being in an independent bookstore, which that's another conversation for another time. The candidate that I have, his name is Leo Buckley. He also plays in a great metal band, Hazard's Cure. So, he's just like, he's a Renaissance man. And when we used to go to Giants games together, one of the broadcasters, every time they would see us walking across there, he'd go, "There he is. There's the guy who looks like the bear from Canned Heat." And another would say, no. He looks like Pigpen from the Grateful Dead. Okay. So, and of course, beautiful. Yeah, we would find out about this. And of course, we smoked dope ahead of time. So we're just staggering around. So we're in character. But yeah, Leo Buckley will be the person that we will tag off to. And I believe he would be a perfect subject because he can really get down into the nuts and bolts in the gutter of what's going on in the book selling industry.
Well, my audience is going to absolutely love this conversation you and I are having. And here's the promise I'm going to make to you and my audience. We're going to do a part 2 and a part 3 if needed, and we're going to attach them to this one. So we're going to have you and I, we need to keep talking. I already know this.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to call you next week, and we're going to plan the next episode. And if we need 3, 4, and 5, we're just going to keep attaching them to this. And if we build the legacy of videos that way, oh well.
Yeah. And the other thing too, just I'll leave everybody with this. So you see all this junk that's inside of here. There's a story behind all of this stuff. So there you go. That's your teaser, for the next episode. And again, I'll just do a little bit of, crass commercialism, as they said on the Black Flag record. Please go to grizzlypulp.com. We sell the books through there. We still have t-shirts available and bundled with books at real reasonable prices. Instagram, you can be able to follow me on Instagram. That's out there. And, I'm easily accessible through that. Unfortunately, we previously were able to sell books on Meta using advertising. For some reason, I'm going to get really close to the camera. Meta believes that Grizzly Pulp is based in Russia. Is there anything about me that skews Russian? And does anything about me look like somebody who's going to be working with fucking rubles? No. So Meta, if you could hear this, you're wrong.
We'll try to at them on Instagram with the feed for this.
Oh, well, good luck with that one.
Interesting. Okay, so I appreciate the time you've given me today. I know there's some stuff going on, but we are definitely going to do a part 2 and 3. Please send me Leo's information.
Absolutely.
And we'll get that through. And again, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Max. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Goodbye.